Okay, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us for the Sustainable Phosphorus webinar series. This is actually installment lucky number 13, and it's on the 13th of January, so hopefully things go well despite the ominous numerology there. My name is Matt Schultz, Program Manager for the Sustainable Phosphorus Alliance, and we have a great webinar today. I'm very excited about this. It's sort of our kickoff webinar for a new NSF funded center on phosphorus sustainability. So the title of the webinar is Giant Steps Towards Phosphorus Sustainability. I want to tell you a little bit about the Sustainable Phosphorus Alliance in case you don't know about us already. We're a members organization, serve as North America's central forum and advocate for the sustainable use, recovery, and recycling of phosphorus in the food system. And we're supported by a slate of founding current members, strategic partners, and these are the folks who help us bring this webinar series to you. And if you'd like to become one of these illustrious, a member of this illustrious group, please reach out to us via our email at phosphorusalliance.org. Happy to talk to you about that, but we'd like to thank our members for supporting us, many of them for many years, so that we could do this and do some of the other activities that we're doing. And part of those activities are actually helping to support this NSF Center that we're going to be talking about today. With that, we can go ahead and get started. So we're going to be talking today about this NSF Center that I mentioned, and you may have heard that if you've looked at any of our social media or exclamatory posts on social media or elsewhere, you may have heard that we were part of a group of many institutions, 8 in fact, that were awarded by the National Science Foundation of the United States, $25 million grant over a 5-year period for studying phosphorus sustainability. And there's an opportunity for a 5-year renewal on that. And this is a huge deal, right? This is a lot of money. And in fact, as far as I can tell, this is probably the largest investment that's ever been made in phosphorus sustainability in the world. The center's directed by Jacob Jones and centered at North Carolina State University. But as I mentioned, I think there are 8 institutes that are collaborating on it. And I also want to take just a moment for us all to pat ourselves on the back, because many of us have been working for many years to raise awareness about phosphorus sustainability issues, building community, and that all helps pave the way for the National Science Foundation to say that this is an area of research that needs to be focused on at the level that it's being focused on. So congratulations to all of us for making that happen. I hope you really stay engaged both with the Phosphorus Alliance and with this center, because there's going to be a lot of great research activity going forward, and we'll hear about that in today's talks. The talks today are really going to be focused just on the research part of the center. As you can imagine, a center this big has multiple dimensions to it, not just research, there's education, there are other components too, but today we're just going to talk about the research components. And the research was organized in the proposal along 3 research themes that really take a holistic approach to the phosphorus sustainability problem. And those themes are organized at different scales. So there's a theme that looks at the micro scale of phosphorus sustainability issues. So things like soil properties and microscopic interactions between phosphates and other types of molecules. Also, there's a component that focuses more at the human scale. So this is more about agronomy issues, wastewater utility issues, et cetera. And then there's a larger third theme, and this is looking at broader issues, looking at watersheds, regional issues, global issues of phosphorus flows, and that sort of thing. We're actually going to talk about those 3 themes in reverse order. So you're going to see theme 3 presented first, then theme 2, then theme 1. But that's just because we're going to start with the big picture, and then we're going to focus down to the smaller details. We'll go ahead and get started then. So these are our 4 speakers for today. We've got Dr. Ross Cesani from North Carolina State, Dr. Rebecca Munich from Arizona State, Dr. Trevor Boyer also from Arizona State, and Dr. Jan Genser from North Carolina State University. And we're going to start today with the first talk, which is going to be from Dr. Ross Cesani. And Ross is the co-deputy director of the new center. Her research interest is in the interface of computational and biological sciences, And her group works to establish engineered systems platforms that integrate advanced quantitative data, data analytics, and phenotyping platforms to increase food security in the 21st century. So Ross, I'd like to now hand this over to you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and ask you to go ahead and take over if I can figure out how to stop sharing my screen, which is...
Matt, I have done it.
You've done it, great.
I am ready to thank you first of all for the introduction and this great opportunity. And I'm ready to welcome virtually everyone to the Science and Technology for Phosphorus Sustainability STEPS Center. As you have heard from Matt, STEPS is a great partnership. STEPS is a quarter at North Carolina State University, and the partners are at the bottom of this slide. Includes Arizona State University, the University of Florida, RTI International, the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, Marquette University, Appalachian State University, and the Joint School of Nanoscience and Nanoengineering, which is a partnership between North Carolina A&T and the University of North Carolina and Greensboro. So we are a large body of talents, experts, students, as you can see here on the bottom. And what I'm gonna highlight, because we're gonna spend some time talking about that, are on our partner map, are the triple bottom line or TBL scenario site that serves as one of the geographical footprints that connect all STEPS participants and will be referenced throughout my presentation and my colleagues' presentation. So what to say? First of all, at the beginning, I have to say that all living things needs phosphorus. It is essential to both animal and plants and is literally in our DNA. Because of this, phosphorus is a critical nutrient in our food system, whereas is using fertilizer because of its influence on plant growth and crop yields. Unfortunately, however, the food system is inefficient and only about 20% of phosphorus enters ultimately in the human diet. And there are downstream environmental impact of phosphorus. And so what I wanted to show you here with this large blue arrow is the linearity of how we are mining, using, and losing phosphorus, and what STEPS does. And I'm gonna, in terms of the phosphorus sustainability, STEPS engage adopters with scientists and engineers to help guide and prioritize research and technology and how to apply these fundamental science and research and technology, breaking down what is this traditional linearity of the phosphorus use, mine, and lose it. And so this is the very first hint of how we're going to approach the phosphorus sustainability. Now, what I would like to tell you more about is that the STEPS team that I present you before is guided by a truly ambitious and aspirational long-term vision. And so in 25 years, that is represented by these 25, in 25 years, we aim for what we do today through the STEPS Center to have had a lasting impact on society and the environment, as demonstrated by a 25% reduction that addresses both the system inputs and the system outputs. And to realize this vision, we do many things, but what I wanted to show here is our STEPS values and goal. We have share value, which are listed in a circular format outside our STEPS emblem. We're all about circularity. And there are 5 core STEPS value. And just to give you a little bit of context, we talk about sustainability. I'll talk a little bit more about convergence in a second. But importantly, STEPS is committed to diversity and inclusion because it's both right and because it fosters innovation and creative thinking. And STEPS value, and this is important for today's webinar, values the intimate engagement of stakeholder through formalized process that guide research priority. These will be expanded later on in my presentation, and it really involves putting together stakeholder at the table with researchers. And so in terms of the sustainability, how STEPS Center defines sustainability is addressing the needs of the present without compromising the needs of the future. In the next slide, I'm going to give you our approach in terms of the phosphorus sustainability, the need of the present. We know that there is inefficiency in phosphorus management, and these pose serious threats to both food and water security that need to be addressed. And due to this inefficient application of phosphorus, soil binding, low plant availability of phosphorus in fertilizer, we know that phosphorus is lost from the food chain primarily through binding to soil, transfer to animal wastes, and agricultural runoff. And so with these in mind, we have built, and you will see how we have built our research around this global phosphorus flow diagram. And we have spent a lot of time around these teeny tiny numbers, which are actually very large numbers, because these numbers represent the million metric tons of phosphorus per year. And you can see how much is used and how much is lost. So the vision, the share value and the goals, the problem demands that we consider all of the aspects of these, I would say, complex and non-linear problem. And so in STEPS, what we have recognized is that phosphorus sustainability spans about 17 orders of magnitude in land scales. We can go from the angstrom scale of the individual phosphorus atom to thinking about microeconomics, geopolitics, and mass transport of phosphorus at the global scales. And so to address the phosphorus sustainability, we put in place a center where there are tight coordination and integration of countless disciplines across the physical, life, social, and economic sciences, and only a few of which are shown here as an example. What I would like to tell you next is that for our vision, for our share value and goals, we kind of like what Matt said at the beginning, going from the top and going down, STEPS has defined 4 important areas in which to focus our attention at phosphorus sustainability. We call these in STEPS as our ambitions, and they guide the STEP research agenda that you will see presented by my esteemed colleagues. Just to give you an overview, the first ambition, soil-bound phosphorus, seek to use material, crops, and processes to make soil-bound phosphorus bioavailable to crop. The second seeks to use crop and material to trap dilute phosphorus to prevent eutrophication. The third seeks to capture phosphorus from animal manure. And the fourth seeks to use material and processes to capture lost phosphorus at its source, for example, human urine. I'm not going to spend much time on these research projects because my colleague will present them. What I would like to highlight here is that the research portfolio of STEPS is very balanced, touches all the different aspects from the material aspect to the human technology to the regional and global science. And those are truly interdisciplinary, but also say theme 1, the gray one, leverage expertise and works relatively closely to theme 2 and theme 3 and vice versa. What I would like to spend some time about is to talk about our TBL bottom line location, which are our geographical footprint. What is important here to highlight is that our TBL sites have well-defined inputs and outputs. They have system constraint, they have existing data and stakeholder narrative that are useful for understanding the triple bottom line factor to sustainable solution, namely the economic, the environmental, and the social factor. And so why they are important is because they contain real field test sites to experiment the new material, the new processes, the new practices and technology the STEPS is developing. And so here you see the triple bottom line that contain the rural farmland at Tidewater Research Station at NC State, the urban watershed site represented by the Central Arizona Phoenix Long-Term Ecological Research, or CAP-LTER, and the aquatic ecosystem, which is South Florida and includes Lake Okeechobee, the Everglades Agricultural Research, and the Everglades National Park. And so in the last few minutes before I give space to my colleague, what I would like to introduce you in terms of this webinar is STEPS knowledge transfer. So STEPS knowledge transfer, we also familiarly call it KT, aims to interact and engage stakeholder as well as transfer knowledge between STEPS researcher and external community group. And therefore, our KT component utilize, as seen by this diagram, utilize a bidirectional flow of information between stakeholder and STEP researcher to ensure practical results are produced from the center, which is extremely important. How do we make sure that this is happening? Well, STEPS and our multi-stakeholder and partner share the same vision and commitment to developing an innovative, diverse, and inclusive phosphorus sustainable workforce. Well, here I'm presenting two examples. There is the stakeholder community group, which is really central to knowledge transfer and STEPS. What it is a group of people who have vested interest in some aspect of phosphorus governance. And this group is the mechanism by which we create the bidirectional knowledge transfer. We're working on building this pipeline, and we imagine it will be about 100 stakeholders, give or take. And its size and composition can change over time as STEPS as we evolve. The second example here, the technical working groups, starts kind of like with the question, how can STEPS most effectively address the stakeholder community group's needs and deliver on its 25 in 25 vision? And so the technical working groups are really intended to connect the stakeholder with STEPS much more closely than what is in a typical stakeholder engagement. And so in this slide, I'm just gonna share with you how you can learn more and get involved with STEPS. Be part of the solution. This is absolutely what I would like to highlight from this slide. Involving phosphorus sustainability and with STEPS, we have an updated STEPS website. We have Twitter feed, as also Matt told you at the beginning. And then we are part of these many webinars. And so attend upcoming events. Maybe Matt can talk a little bit more about that, but there's gonna be a Sustainable Phosphorus Summit and a Phosphorus Forum. Now, before I'm leaving you, what I wanted to say is wordly simplify. While we, STEPS, have a defined 25 in 25 vision, what I would like to say is that it's important to recognize that, as also Matt says, we're not working towards this ambitious vision alone. But these slides overview some of the other initiatives, and I've seen at the beginning a few chats of our great friends also across the pond. So what I can say is we are a large group of individual and initiative focus on phosphorus sustainability. And I really cannot talk about all of these in the details, but what I would like to leave you is where STEPS is unique from these fantastic initiative, yet how also STEPS builds upon these existing initiative. And what I wanted to show you is throughout what my colleague will present is how we're gonna get towards envisioning our 10 years outcome and how our research will be impactful. How in 10 years we aim to have altered landscape of phosphorus sustainability in the US and globally. And so our team envisioned the STEPS will have accelerated discovery, for example, of metric-specific removal technology for specific surface, water, wastewater, and soil, that we would have material that recover phosphorus, that we would have identify new transformation pathway between organic and inorganic phosphate, and that we will have an effective human intervention portfolio that are resilient to the socioeconomical policy and environmental changes. How we envision that? We were envisioning using our ambition space on phosphorus, soil bound, and etc. So we will address phosphorus fixation in soil to make soil bound phosphorus bioavailable to plant roots. The next generation of plant responses fertilizer, new sensor to enable real-time tracking of phosphorus. And with all of this information, the first of its kind national map of phosphorus sinks and sources. And last but not least, what we envision as a lasting legacy of STEPS students that are at the heart of every academic research center. So we envision that some of the STEPS graduates will continue their work towards the 25 in 25 vision long after NSF funding, and they will also contribute to innovation to other societal grand challenges. And so what I want to do as my last 30 seconds is worth reiterating and saying the STEPS, the Science and Technology for Phosphorus Sustainability, is a convergent research center with phosphorus sustainability as a vehicle. And I thank Matt for the possibility. And now I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and I welcome Rebecca to present the research from Team 3 of STEPS.
Great, thank you so much, Ross, for that presentation. We do have some questions that have come in through the Q&A. I want to be a little mindful of time. So I'm going to ask the panelists try to type some answers to these questions that are in the Q&A box that we don't get to in these sort of intervening segments. And also let the speakers know we probably have about 15 minutes per presentation going forward. And we should be fine on time. We're doing well. So maybe I'll just throw out a couple of these questions to address live, and then the rest could be handled via the Q&A back and forth. So the first one here I wanted to pose, and maybe this is a good question for you, Ross, or possibly Trevor. But Pam Marone says, I maybe missed it, but are you going to work on the microbiome and various microbes that can improve pea uptake?
Oh, that's an excellent question. And it goes directly to also what is research of the different expert in STEPS. Personally, I say yes, because we cannot not include microbes. Is an ecosystem where there is a soil, and the plant interface with soil is also the plant interface with microbes. So yes, you will see how we have a 1-year series of project under the STEPS umbrella, and we can absolutely include and see how we can expand on these research portfolio for year 2 and 3 and the many years to come. So to your question, yes, absolutely. We are consider microbes as part of these new technology and new innovation. Thank you for your question.
Yeah, and just maybe to add a little on to that, the research portfolio is something that's evolving over time, and we have an internal RFP process for the researchers to pose new projects. And so we're always looking for ideas from the stakeholder community, and we'll be adjusting course as things go along. One other question, and then I'll ask the rest of the panel address the other questions in the Q&A. This is from Ed Weinberg. It's been a while. How you doing, Ed? Will the NCSU researchers involved in pea recovery from manures focus on swine over dairy farms? Maybe one for you, Ross, or maybe, maybe
Trevor. Either myself or Trevor.
Yeah.
That's again an excellent question. You can see how there's going to be a lot of space where to use our new technology, and that's why we need many people and experts. So currently, yes, as also Matt says, we have a 1-year research portfolio, but that is evolving over time. And what we're going to do is to use the regional and global, I would say, modeling approach to see where is the most impact that comes. So if it's swine or dairy lagoon, I would say with the data that we acquire over the first, I would say, survey mapping, then our research will be readopted and change in a very agile manner.
Great, thank you so much, Ross. And now we're going to switch over to theme 3. Again, we're kind of going in reverse order of the themes from the big picture theme to the smaller scale theme. I want to introduce Dr. Rebecca Munich, and she is an environmental engineer with experience in environmental modeling. She joined Arizona State as an assistant professor in the School of Sustainable Engineering and the Built Environment in the fall of 2017. And her research is focused on integrating geospatial sciences and watershed modeling to evaluate trade-offs in land and water management, especially for water quality outcomes. So, Becca, thanks for joining us, and very interested in hearing your presentation today.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And like Matt, I'll echo that I see lots of familiar names in the chat as well, and lots of new ones. So looking forward to connecting with all of you. I am, as Matt said, Becca Munich. I am a Theme 3 co-lead with my colleague Justin Baker. And I hope through my brief presentation that I convey that in Theme 3, we're kind of like a glue that brings together all of the theme researchers throughout STEPS. So as you know, and as we've kind of talked about already, phosphorus is not just limited to phosphorus issues, and sustainability issues are not just limited to the US, even though we are a funded center based in the US. So there are regional and global links and implications even that influence US phosphorus sustainability issues. So recognizing that, Theme 3 really covers this larger scale movement of phosphorus, somewhere around the watershed scale all the way up to global scale. And really what we're driven by as researchers in Theme 3 is this need to really understand and quantify how current phosphorus flows are happening, and how we impact those flows through maybe technological interventions or socio-political interventions, management. And what we're interested in is dynamically evolving this modeling framework so that not only can we help drive STEPS and generally technological research around phosphorus, but also help predict how some potential innovations coming out might influence things down the road. And this really goes back to the 25 and 25 vision that STEPS has, and trying to help us figure out what we have to achieve that already and what might be needed, and which things, technologies, interventions, management strategies might work best and where. So I just wanted to give a nod to all of the research leads that work within Theme 3 here. I've kind of colored their institution name by the institution so you get an idea of where everybody's from. And this doesn't include the myriad of postdocs and scholars, students that are also already participating in STEPS. So it's a really great dynamic team with people across all spectrums of phosphorus sustainability. So generally, our approach in Theme 3 has kind of 4 core areas, from global integrated modeling to multi-scale mapping of phosphorus sources, sinks, and impacts, integrated life cycle analysis and techno-economic analysis, and then really bringing in sort of that research-based stakeholder interaction within Theme 3. So, just briefly, I just want to talk about some of the things we're doing in each of these areas. So this is sort of our broad vision. And then after this, I'll go in and talk about some of that, current research portfolio projects that we're working on at the moment. But, our overall goal within these areas, one of the things is to really improve how we represent phosphorus markets, constraints, and what options we have at controlling global and regional scale flows. And really trying to understand how those then downscale and impact things at a more local scale. We're also interested in really integrating data from a variety of sources, developing new data products, as you'll see in a minute, and really honing in on how a lot of the inputs really connect with the impacts. How do the inputs connect to stores, to sources, to sinks, to the algal blooms that we then see, and really doing this on a much finer spatio-temporal scale than we've done before. And then what we also want to do is be able to optimize where new interventions that our STEPS team or researchers outside of STEPS working on phosphorus, how do we get those into the best place, whether they're a technology or whether they're maybe a stakeholder engagement. How do we know where to intervene, and in what way, with what portfolio of interventions, to be able to influence this complex system. And then finally, what we want to do with the stakeholder piece is really to understand the network of the stakeholders to figure out who's the most influential. How do we promote and share widespread adoption of some of the things that we're innovating here at STEPS, and in a way that's responsible. So I just wanted to add this slide just to show how, since we're going first, how Theme 3 connects to Theme 1 and Theme 2. So it's all about co-creation. And I said we're dynamically modeling because we want to always be improving what we're doing based on things we're learning and co-creating with the other themes. So with Theme 1, we want to take their technology assessments and improve our portfolio analysis in order to help prioritize things on the material scale. With Theme 2, we want to be able to analyze some of the interventions or technologies they're developing and understand how they work under environmental and market changes. And this will help us to prioritize research and maybe new ideas that can then go back to these themes. So I just kind of highlighted again, we have this global modeling that hopefully offers insights to where we can intervene. Some of that really high scale spatial temporal modeling can help demonstrate some of the impacts of the interventions that we're developing, as well as identify areas that need more options in terms of their portfolio for interventions. And then through our social network analysis and engagement with stakeholders, we're hoping to increase the impact of all of the possible portfolio interventions that we come up with. So I'm going to, again, switch to just talking more about what are we doing right now and in the very near term to address some of these big scale things that we want to do in theme 3. And so right now we're really, I kind of put it in terms of we're building the foundations for some of that dynamic modeling that we want to do. So we're prioritizing data collection, data synthesis, data creation where we need it, and really trying to test and advance some of the new methods to help build that new modeling structure that can adapt as steps evolve and as our interventions evolve over time. So I'm going to go over, we have 5 current research projects that Theme 3 is leading, and I've listed them here with their lead PIs, but I'm going to go into more detail for each of them. So the first one I want to talk about is really, I kind of went with Matt's theme, going larger scale to smaller scale. So we're starting with more of the global modeling foundations here. So this is led by Justin Baker and other PIs within Theme 3. And really the focus of this research project is to provide decision support and really road mapping to help us think about how do we achieve that 25 and 25 goal given what we have now and what's needed in order to meet that goal. So, you know, the focus of this is really helping to develop these roadmaps that help achieve these. And these roadmaps might include things like policy interventions. They could be technological solutions that exist or that are hopefully going to exist through the STEPS research initiatives. And then, of course, research advances that might be needed. So we have some unique approaches, which I'm trying to highlight throughout these projects, including nested systems modeling, starting at the global to national scale, but hopefully that will go and then influence regional to more local scales eventually. And then what this does, the benefit for this project is really to help us look at how different market policy, environmental interventions influence phosphorus dynamics at sort of this big scale, the global and regional scale, so that we can think about how that then impacts some of those road-mapped interventions in terms of future change. The second one, now this is National Phosphorus Budget Mapping, and it's phase 1 because we're just getting started, and this is of course in the US. But we hope that the things we're doing within this project would, and the methods we're creating will be applicable to other places as well. But essentially what we want to do is we really need to be able to evaluate some of the road mapping strategies identified previously and how they affect both retention of phosphorus within different sinks across the US, and then how they impact losses, which then lead to unintended consequences. Our approach is really to start, this is a big data synthesis project, really bringing together both publicly available data on sources and impacts and retention, but also control measures. And then we also want to create new data using some remote sensing techniques and new data science to be able to identify sources that are currently unidentifiable or hard to find, and be able to integrate that into the larger budget. We're going to be using a Bayesian framework, which helps us have more uncertainty estimates for estimating where interventions might be useful or how impactful they could be. And really with all of this, more, a little higher resolution scale than the global to regional modeling, what this helps us do is to be able to connect sources to control measures and sinks, releases to the environment, and really helps us plan and optimize our options for managing phosphorus within the US. And again, we hope that the techniques and methods that we're using here can expand even beyond the US. The third project I want to talk about is related to the triple bottom line scenario sites that Ross mentioned. So for this one, we want to be able to kind of take what we're doing at the US scale and do even higher resolution modeling at places like our TBLs where we have more detailed data. So we really want to use this to really hone our models and improve the way they quantify phosphorus fluxes in the environment. To do this, we're building upon years and years. I don't know how many terabytes of existing data at all these sites to be able to understand the fate of phosphorus at these sites, which can help us improve our models. And we're also going to be collecting new data, like doing some isotopic P tracing to be able to improve our models as well. And we hope that these high resolution models can lead to improved models, not just for these sites, but for our national scale models and beyond, and really help us test at a smaller scale some of the intervention strategies that we already have or that we have as STEPS continues. Next, I want to talk about two projects that are related to our research on the stakeholder engagement piece. So the first, led by Kara Grieger, is evaluating stakeholder perception needs and networks in STEPS research. And so really the need here is that if we want to have the S in STEPS, the sustainable solutions for phosphorus management, we need to really understand and respond to the needs of different stakeholders and their priorities. And as many of you on the call know, there are many stakeholders within the phosphorus management environment and quite a diversity. So understanding these stakeholders is going to be key to ensuring the sustainability of any solutions or roadmaps that we could offer. So the approach for this is to try and understand stakeholder perceptions and needs, as well as their network. So that's kind of the diagram on the right, really trying to understand how these stakeholders already interact to help leverage that to enhance adoptability of any solutions. And this is going to be done through surveys and interviews with key stakeholders. And then what we hope to provide through this is an ability to ensure responsible innovation by also meet stakeholder needs. So through our interventions. And then lastly, but not least, another stakeholder-based project led by Anna Maria Marshall is on adoption and diffusion of innovation. So this first year or two of funding is really focused on case studies of existing STEPS technologies. So, really focused on that technology and stakeholder piece. So it's really, there's a need to be able to, if we want to meet 25 and 25 years goes fast, as I'm learning as a new mom, that the years fly by. So fast and targeted and widespread. So really 3 large goals for these technologies is really needed. So to be able to do that, we need to have grounded case studies of how some of these technologies can be adopted and diffused within those stakeholder networks identified previously. And in order, what this helps us do is improve not only our own knowledge of how these technologies get adopted and diffused for our own purposes of STEPS, but it also expands just existing social scientific theories and really contributes maybe to broader adoption and innovation models. And I think with that, that's the last of my slides.
Great, thank you very much, Becca. And we've got just a couple questions. And I think, I first would like to go to this question. James Reed has been very patiently waiting for an answer to his, which is how are we quantifying existing phosphorus in agriculture soil? And maybe Ross, you can take this one.
Absolutely, happy to. What I would do is also to make sure Team 2 comes up soon. This is one of our research portfolio project of this year. But shortly to say that what we do, we use chemical and spectroscopic approaches to characterize the legacy phosphorus in different soil to determine specifically how speciation relates to plant availability. And so we use field trials and greenhouse experiment, and we really study how legacy phosphorus pools are used by plants under different phosphorus fertilization regimes and based on the phosphorus that is quantified in soil. I hope that answers your question in brief, but Trevor will touch and expand on that.
Great, thank you, Ross. And Becca, there's a question from Ed Weinberg here. Any plans to link phosphorus modeling of fate and transport to HABs occurrences on a TBL and on a global basis?
Sorry, I didn't catch quite the end of that. If it's only on a global basis, I think
whether it's on a TBL or on a global basis, I think.
Okay. Yeah. So definitely, that is a goal, is to start linking, the sources, the fate to the impacts. And I forgot to mention Dan Obenauer, who's leading our phosphorus budget mapping. But he, I think you may know Dan, but he's definitely an expert in that, as well as Natalie Nelson. And those are definitely plans for steps. We're trying to sort of build the foundations of the fate and transport and budget piece first, but we will be doing that at some point. Yes.
Great, thank you. And Trevor, if you want to go ahead and take control of the presentation, I can read a bit of bio about you. Thanks again, Becca. And our next presenter is Dr. Trevor Boyer. He's an associate professor in the School of Sustainable Engineering in the Built Environment at Arizona State. His research develops approaches to the treatment of water at various stages in its life cycle so as to maximize water conservation, recover valuable materials, sequester harmful contaminants, minimize the production of waste byproducts, and advance the water energy food nexus. So Trevor, thanks so much for agreeing to talk to us, and looking forward to your presentation.
Great, thanks, Matt. And I'm excited to be on this webinar and continue sharing the work we're doing in STEPS. I'm going to talk about theme 2, sort of nestled here in the middle. We call theme 2 the human technology scale. And what we're really trying to do here in theme 2 is span both phosphorus recovery technologies, looking at a variety of waste streams, and then also more efficient use of phosphorus, in most cases focused on agricultural use. And so I'll go through these projects and give some highlights. And I should say now that if you have interest in any of these projects, feel free to email me and I can connect you with those researchers to better get your questions answered. But what you'll see in these projects is really this wide scale that we're working at. Some of the work is more, laboratory or pilot based, even in some cases demonstration scale. In the agricultural setting, greenhouse and field work. And then quite a few of the projects have a modeling component as well. Okay, the research team, there is a lot of overlap between the themes. And so you'll see some people who span multiple themes, and that's really key for that connectivity. Because theme 2, importantly serves as this bridge between themes 1 and themes 3. You have a sense now of sort of what theme 3 encompasses from Becca's talk. And after me, you'll hear from Jan on the sort of where theme 1 is going more at the molecular scale. And so theme 2 is really trying to span those. And because of that, we have researchers from environmental engineering, biological engineering, soil geochemistry, plant physiology, and other related disciplines. So a really diverse team that's going to allow us to, again, span the themes, innovative ways for phosphorus recovery, innovative approaches to phosphorus use in agriculture. And one more introductory slide, just to kind of frame theme 2. If we start here, hopefully you can see in the upper right and move clockwise, what we're trying to do at sort of a theme 2 level would be, look at phosphorus separation in waste streams. There are many very interesting, from an environmental engineering and environmental chemistry point of view, there's a lot of interesting waste streams out there where phosphorus is a key component, but there's other sort of problematic components as well. So separation is key, followed by separation is recovery. And there's still, although that's an active area of research, there's a lot of challenges still to getting phosphorus in a recovered and usable form. So we go from separation to recovery. And then, of course, the whole point of recovery is use. And so what we want to be able to do is recover phosphorus in forms that are valuable, and then make sure that those forms of phosphorus are used more efficiently. And so theme 2 has a strong agricultural component in terms of looking at soil, looking at plant types to more effectively use phosphorus. Following this, there's a major emphasis within theme 2 of phosphorus sensing. There is some, limited capabilities for phosphorus sensing now in different matrices, but we see a lot of potential in both sensor development and sort of novel sensor applications that could really advance phosphorus sustainability. And then ending here at the top of the figure, because theme 2 spans from sort of the molecular scale to the regional global scale, it's an opportunity to generate techno-economic data that can support both of the themes, both the sort of more sort of discovery phase in theme 2, or excuse me, in theme 1, and then the applications in theme 3. So now I'll spend just maybe a minute or so on each of these projects, just giving some highlights of what they're doing. I should say that most of these projects started, in late 2021, and so they're really just getting underway now. And again, feel free to contact me and I can connect you with the researchers. So I'm leading a project on human urine as a boundary for advancing phosphorus recovery. And the premise for this work is that urine is this unique waste stream that really is a phosphate and nitrogen solution. And if we can think of how to separate it up front with things like waterless urinals and urine diverting toilets, then buildings can become, resource recovery factories themselves. A lot of work has been done at wastewater plants to recover phosphorus, but I think we should move that further upstream, and especially looking at, commercial and institutional buildings where the majority of water use involves, toilet flushing, for example. You would save on that potable water use, and then you'd be able to separate that waste stream up front. So there, in addition to the nutrient recovery, there's water conservation benefits, and there's other life cycle benefits. So we have a diverse team working on this project. We're spanning what we call the bottom left here, the materials scale. So really understanding urine chemistry, processes such as urea hydrolysis can influence phosphorus availability. We then move up here to question 2, the technology scale of how do we actually implement this in buildings? And a large part of this project is focused at the building scale, where we have a building that's plumbed to separate urine at the source and collect it. And then importantly, because theme 2 does sort of span theme 1 to theme 3, there are strong linkages in this project to some of the projects that Becca just mentioned about stakeholders and risk. And so there's a big part of this project looking at whether stakeholders recognize the need for novel wastewater treatment and the value for resource recovery. So now moving on, there were some questions early on in the webinar about related to this and sort of animal waste and phosphorus recovery. So Bruce Rittman at ASU is leading a project characterizing phosphorus after anaerobic treatment. And what I could say is that this project, again, is in its early phases. And I commented that they're considering both, manure, swine waste, but what the purpose of this project is really, deeper than just the source of animal waste, but it is, looking at the anaerobic digestion process and really being able to understand, link the waste stream to the composition of the phosphorus. We know that orthophosphate gets created, but there's a lot of various organic phosphorus components that get created. So here in this case, this project has a strong linkage to theme 1, and in terms of developing phosphorus analytic technologies so that we can understand when we take a waste stream such as manure or swine waste and we digest it, what are the forms of phosphorus that are created, and that would then influence what can be recovered and how it can be reused. In addition, there's a strong mechanistic modeling component to this in terms of the biotechnology. This slide just further shows the linkages in terms of objective 1, bench scale anaerobic digestion, looking at the various forms of phosphorus, and then this objective 2 is trying to develop novel p-analytical methods to better quantify what most of us might just call dissolved organic phosphorus, really trying to understand what that is, and then being able to model this. And the modeling part would then allow, again, going back to that question of linking to different sources, manure, swine waste. And I should mention as I leave this slide that a strong motivating factor for this project is the fact that we have so much animal waste generated within the agricultural system, and we're not capturing the phosphorus or the energy here to the extent that we can. And so to really advance the sort of large aspirations of steps, we need to go after these large lost fractions of phosphorus. So now we transition from projects that are focused on phosphorus recovery to projects that are now focused on more efficiently using phosphorus. And this is a really interesting project led by Owen Duckworth at North Carolina State University. And it's developing phosphite, as a sustainable next generation fertilizer. So the rationale for this work is that there's been some suggestions that phosphite can be used as fertilizer as it's currently used. It's, for things such as weed control or pest management. And so the idea would be if we could take phosphite as shown in the diagram here and be able to, make use of the soil and microbes and have the plants utilize phosphite instead of phosphate. In terms of the questions Owen and his team are pursuing, it spans different scales here in terms of, a deeper question here in the chemistry of the soils and the binding of phosphite to mineral surfaces. That'll be looked at through various, both, theoretical calculations and spectroscopy. Then from a production point of view, the way phosphite is produced now is not a, let's say, glamorous or sustainable process. It's also not produced with any sort of commodity uses in mind. And so we would, Owen and his team would be exploring other ways to produce phosphite, for example, electrochemical methods. And then quite a bit of work in this project will be done at the soil scale, looking at phosphite binding and its fate in the soils. Moving on to phosphorus use by plants. Again, there were a lot of questions early on in the webinar about this. So this is led by Ruben at North Carolina State University. Ross is part of this, so can help answer questions on this. The idea for this project is understanding if plants can be sort of developed that can more efficiently use phosphorus. And so what's shown on this map here is the idea that there are plant varieties that can grow in sort of phosphorus depleted soils and that they can use phosphorus very efficiently. So can we identify sort of the genes or traits of those plants that have been able to use phosphorus very efficiently and combine that with plant traits that have shown high yield? Because what we'd ultimately like to do is have a plant variety that can, very efficiently use phosphorus in soils and also be a high yield plant. And so this work has, a lot of deep plant physiology, including, DNA sequencing to really understand the variety of the plants that are going to allow them to efficiently use phosphorus in these lean soils and have high yield. And then to round out the portfolio for theme 2 would be Luke's project here, Luke based at North Carolina State University, and that is controlling and utilizing legacy phosphorus in soils. Again, there are some comments in the Q&A about the buildup of phosphorus in soils. And there are places where phosphorus is highly built up in soils. And there are still a lot of questions surrounding the idea of being able to sort of remobilize or make this phosphorus in soils bioavailable. The question in the chat, which I could just sort of address now, or actually Luke and his team can probably address better, would be, yes, I mean, this project is targeted at those places where phosphorus has been used repeatedly and built up in soils. It's recognized that that's not, necessarily everywhere a problem, but there are places where they have this history of high phosphorus use, but there isn't the understanding of how to really sort of mine and use that legacy P. So Luke is based at the Tidewater region of North Carolina State University, where they have fields that have 50 plus years of high phosphorus application. And so in this project, the motivating questions are, at the molecular scale, looking at the speciation of the phosphorus and its forms and how it can become more bioavailable. A big agronomic component to this of looking at plant yield through both greenhouse and field studies at this site. And then because it's, focused on, really changing practice, there's a big adoption piece to this project in terms of working with stakeholders and understanding, sort of their needs and their receptions to this type of work. And so to wrap up this project, what I wanted to emphasize is, that where Theme 2 lies in the sort of STEPS research portfolio is it's highly integrative. It's highly integrative from sort of the molecular scale through the sort of regional global scale. And then even within Theme 2, it's highly integrative. If you think of the data types that are being generated from bench and lab and demonstration experiments, looking at phosphorus recovery, in terms of phosphorus use, greenhouse and field studies, in terms of modeling, mechanistic and empirical, data-driven models, and then this idea of sensing, both developing new sensors and novel sensor applications. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions live, or I will follow up in the chat.
Great, thank you, Trevor. There are just a couple questions in the Q&A, so we'll go ahead and do those live right now. The first is probably better directed at Ross, which would be, will there be any opportunities for the international researchers to work with STEPS? Ross, do you want to say anything?
Absolutely, happy to. And it's a very important question. And we really want to engage international collaborators and partners. What we do and how we do it, STEPS is part of an NSF, also AccelNet, that is an international collaboration aimed at accelerating integration of engineering, plant science, and agricultural research. That's called AI2Year. And so as part of this collaborative research of networks, STEPS being part of these networks, allows that collaborators within STEPS can really leverage aspect of international mini grant exchange of student and early career, postdoc and researchers. It also allows for being part of a professional development. So we have way to absolutely engage with the international collaborators. And what I'm going to put in the response in the Q&A or in the chat is the link to these AccelNet.
Great. And I'm just looking at the time here, and we probably should actually move on to Jan, to your third talk here. If the team wouldn't mind looking at the last two questions, there's a couple of good questions left there in the Q&A. And Jan, if you want to take over the presentation, I can then read your bio and we can move forward. So Dr. Jan Genzer is the S. Frank and Susan Culberson Distinguished Professor and Associate Department Head in the Chemical and Biomolecular Engineering Department at North Carolina State University. His group at NC State is actively involved in research relating to the behavior of polymers at the interfaces and in confined polymers at interfaces and in confined geometries, with a particular emphasis on assembly, thin films, responsive and shape memory materials, and materials combinatorial methods. So thanks so much, Jan, for agreeing to speak with us today, and looking forward to your presentation.
All right, wonderful. So good morning, everybody. Maybe good afternoon for people on the East Coast. I want to first thank Matt for the opportunity to tell you a little bit about Theme 1. And also mention that, as you may have noticed from my brief CV, that I'm the least phosphorus person on the panel, because my background really is material science. And I just share, and I've made it clear to many of my colleagues in the center many times, this has been a fascinating journey for me to learn about things that let's say 3 years ago, I've never thought about. And so the Theme 1, as we are moving down, spans length scales that range, let's say, from atomistic levels, that will be angstrom, to, let's say, a few microns. And the general goal of the theme is to design materials that will be able to capture and release or transform phosphorus in complex matrices. What makes this theme unique, that it brings together computational approaches all the way from atomistic to design of new materials. Very importantly, development and utilization of analytics that actually permeates throughout not only Theme 1, but also through all the themes. And you have heard a little bit about that from Becca and from Trevor. The goal really is to use a systematic approach using both computational and materials approaches to study the present state of phosphorus in various matrices. You heard about all those matrices in Russ's presentation: soils, urine, animal waste, and water waste. So it's a fairly complex task, and I will try to briefly outline 6 projects that have started as the center commenced its operation back in October last year, that to some extent address all those various issues, and that is capture of phosphorus from reactive matrices. This is probably the most explored area so far, even with some commercial successes. But we will have also efforts in trying to capture phosphorus from non-reactive matrices, or to convert non-reactive matrices to reactive ones. You heard about Bruce's project in the anaerobic digestion that Trevor mentioned. I'll mention one project that Brooke Mayer is working on. So let's see if I can advance. So this is the first project, as I mentioned. Brooke Mayer from Marquette University is leading an effort in conversion of non-reactive phosphate, which is primarily organic phosphate, into an organic form. And that is typically done through various biochemical or chemical transformations. The biochemical may involve specific enzyme or microbial communities that help to achieve the goal. In this case, chemical transformations will take place, such as, for instance, hydrolysis or other types of chemical modifications that will help liberate phosphorus from existing matrices. A big part of this effort will actually rely on the analytics, which I will describe in the next project, because we need to learn about the state of binding of phosphorus in these complex organic matrices, which are much more complex than the inorganic ones, and follow the transformation and recovery steps from these matrices. So again, the outcome will be learning about various transformation mechanisms, their efficacy using analytical approaches and chemical transformations. I already mentioned the analytics being a very, very important component of the entire STEP Center. And so the overall goal of this project is to develop a uniform, standardized protocols that will be applied not only in Theme 1, but also in Theme 2 and Theme 3, will lead to development of standard operating procedures that all researchers, not only in the STEP Center, but also outside STEP, can use. We have a fantastic team of contractors with a lot of experience in characterizing various types of materials. And so the approach will involve first training the methods using model compounds that will enable us to apply various methods such as spectroscopies, microscopies, techniques that can be found in individual PI's labs, all the way to techniques that are available in national labs, and cross-correlate the information that these various techniques offer. Now, a very important part of this effort will also involve combination of the analytics with materials informatics. And the overall combination will really provide general insight into data integration on these various approaches that will ultimately help us design chemical motifs for capturing agents, types of surface chemistries, or all the other attributes that are needed to effectively capture and also release phosphorus from these matrices on demand, right? So we really would like to push the area to go beyond just chemical analysis of phosphorus, at the very least, just moving from identifying what is organic and inorganic phosphorus, but going further, learning more about polarity and aspects like that. And so, again, this information will be very, very important for another project in the theme 1, which learns about interaction of reactive inorganic orthophosphates with cations. Another project that Brooke will lead involves a capture of organic phosphorus using biomimetic materials. So there are specific phosphate binding proteins that are capable of actually capturing organic phosphates. And so the goal of this project is generally to learn from Mother Nature, take these proteins, immobilize them on solid materials, solid matrices, and study, first of all, whether these proteins perform the same way as they would in a biological environment, but also study what is the optimal spacing of the proteins, what is the optimal mobility of these proteins on the surface, so that we can capture phosphate. Of course, this approach requires systematic studies, experimental studies, but also molecular level insight into the interaction between the phosphorus and the protein. And so molecular simulations will be used to provide this information, and machine informatics will help optimize the system so that we can produce effective capturing targets that will feature high affinity, very high selectivity. This is what this system offers, which is a little bit different from other materials, and optimal rate of absorption, right? So it will involve design of not only the peptides, but also the solid state in terms of types of material, shape, size, etc., etc. So the project that I am leading and with my colleagues listed on this slide is aimed to design combinatorial high throughput methodologies that can be used to mine data leading to effective phosphorus capture and also ultimately release, right? So again, this is in the same vein of trying to find optimal conditions to design effective materials for capture phosphorus from various matrices. I'll tell you a little bit about the approach that we plan to use on this slide. So we will be specifically creating substrates that will feature these polymer grafts that are attached chemically covalently to the substrate. And these brushes will vary in their length or spacing on the surface. The brushes will act as support for capturing agents. And these agents can be metal oxide particles, they can be cations, they can be peptides, they can be anything that binds phosphates. So in our initial studies, since we know that iron oxides are fairly effective in capturing phosphate from various matrices, we will first attach iron oxide particles to these polymer brushes. I refer to those as Christmas trees with ornaments. We will systematically vary the concentration of the particles, and the spacing of the polymer will enable us to vary mobility of the system. And we will study how these two combined effects in orthogonal manner help us identify optimal conditions. Now, once we know the information, then we can start changing from iron oxide to other types of targets. And so the idea here is to provide a systematic data capture that will be monitored using the analytical methods and processed using machine informatics. The next project involves capture of reactive phosphorus, and it's going to be led by Chris Muhich from Arizona State University. The goal of this project is to combine density functional theory with experimental studies to identify the role of cations when capturing orthophosphates, and particularly looking at the type of cation, valency, the conditions of the capture, such as pH, etc. So the goal is to provide really very atomistic level insight into the type of interactions, which ultimately will help us design very effective targets that not only capture, but ultimately help release the cargo from these capturing sites. So the unique approach here is the combination of the density functional theory and the experiment that provides systematic insight into these processes. Right? So while a lot of studies have been conducted in the past that indicate the efficacy of phosphates binding to various metals or metal oxides and showing that there is a pH dependence on whether it's an iron or aluminum or cadmium, a base material that can capture phosphate. There is really lack of molecular insight into these phenomena. In addition, what these studies enable to address is the role of various crystallographic planes on specific absorption of phosphates from various matrices. The last project I will mention is led by Wei Gao from NC State. And so what Wei tries to do is to combine her expertise in a 2D material, carbonaceous materials such as graphite or graphene oxides, to provide new support for effective phosphate binding agents. And so she will start working with, again, phosphate binding proteins. And she will embed those on a surface of an activated graphene oxide and start asking questions about the density, the mobility of the phosphate binding proteins in capturing phosphate from various matrices. So this is one example where she uses a specific riboflavin kinase that has 3 capturing sites, glycine, serine, and tyrosine, to effectively bind protein in a very specific manner. This is my very last slide. I am not so organized as nicely as Becca and Trevor showing the connection, but let me just maybe summarize everything in a very simple sentence that this Theme 1 effort involves combined experimental, computational, and analytical approaches to collect and interpret data in some sort of materials informatics workflow that will enable us to design, first of all, gain fundamental understanding of phosphorus interactions that will lead to better capture and ultimately release. That really is the biggest goal. And designing new materials that are motivated by the insight from our colleagues working in the Theme 3, hopefully leading to technologies that can be developed and tested in Theme 2. Thank you for your attention. I think I'm going to stop sharing here.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Jan, for that presentation. And I'd like to thank all of the speakers for their presentations today. It looks like we're going to finish on time, which is great. And it looks like I just had one question come in from Ed Weinberg for you, Jan, which is, will metal cation studies include more exotic elements? And so he's listed cesium, lawrencium, zirconium, I guess those are. My chemistry's old, where pure research is more scarce for these known P binders.
Yeah, they do come from the same group as the traditional methods. I don't know if Chris is online. I know that some of those are radioactive, so I'm not quite sure whether we would like to work with them. But I don't want to butcher the question, so I don't know if Chris is available to answer the question. Otherwise, I will just need to probably provide the answer later on.
Yeah, why don't we do that, Jan? Ed, if you want to send me an email, I think you have my address and I can connect you. Great, so we'll leave it at that. I do want to plug a few events that are coming up. And once again, thanks to all the speakers. And please note in the chat that stepcenter.org, as it's spelled in the chat, will get you to the website for this group. I want to plug Phosphates 2022, which is happening on March 7th to 9th of this year. It's down in Tampa, and if you're an Alliance member, you can get a 10% discount to the event. So please check them out. And also I want to mention that ESPP is having their conference in Vienna this summer in June. And I'm sorry, I don't have a slide up for that, but I see my friend Ludwig Herman is here from ESPP. So please check out the ESPP website for details on that conference. And then we're also planning to have our Phosphates Week Conference, which is going to take place, it looks like, the first week of November. So stay tuned for details on that. There'll be a big event hosted at North Carolina State University, and we'll have more details to come. So I want to thank everyone again for participating, for showing up, and congratulate everyone again on this big milestone in the phosphorus sustainability community. And I hope to see you next time at the next webinar. Thanks so much. Goodbye.